Hi, I'm Dr. Cynthia Clark, acupuncture physician, applied clinical nutritionist, and the creator of Energy Evolution. And welcome to Longevity Wellness. We're so delighted to be working with you, and we're so proud of you for taking this important step on your healing journey. As we go along, you're going to learn a lot of information, and the reason for that is because that's my job. The word doctor actually means educator, and so we aim to help you learn how to heal your body through education and natural means, and we partner with you in order to experience a wonderful symbiotic combination and to reach the goal of joyful living. So we want the whole being to be happy and healthy. So that includes your physical body. It also includes your energetic body, which is part of why we do acupuncture. It includes your emotional body. So we do emotional clearing techniques. It even includes the spiritual aspect of your body, which is why we teach you how to clear things up so that you can be fully integrous in all of your intentions in the universe. So there are a few things that I wanted to talk to you about as we get started. And these are some of the basics, but I find that the basics are really important. So for example, one of them is, and the first and the most important is drinking water. And the reason that that's so important is because, to be quite honest, most people, we get this wrong. Either we think that we're drinking more water than we are, or we don't realize how much water we should be drinking in the first place. So you may have learned the 64 ounces for your, for everybody, eight glasses of 8 ounces a day. But the truth is that that isn't actually for everyone. In fact, the best way to calculate how much water you need is to take your body weight in pounds. So for a 200-pound person, it's going to be 200, and then you're going to divide that in half. So that's going to give you 100, and that's the number of ounces of water that you should drink. So 100 ounces. So if you are 200 pounds and you're a little bit constipated and you're drinking 64 ounces of water a day, most likely the good news is that the simple equation is that you just need to be drinking 100 ounces of water a day. Now there is an exception to this, and I'm mentioning this because I live in Sarasota, Florida, and in Sarasota, Florida, it's very hot and it's humid. Well, it's much less hot than other places I've lived. It's actually quite nice, but it's still hot and humid. And here in that climate, sweat doesn't evaporate the way that it does in more arid climates. So I used to live in Colorado Springs, which was the home of the Olympic Training Center. And a lot of people would come there and they're like, I'm so parched, I'm so thirsty. And that it was very easy for them to know that they needed to drink more water. However, the truth of the matter is that you actually need more water when you are at sea level in a hot climate, and especially in a hot, humid climate, than you do when you are at altitude in an arid climate. And the reason for that is because when you are in an arid climate, when I lived in Colorado, I would sweat, it would evaporate, I would get cool, and everything worked the way that it should, and my body would cool down. But here in Florida, when I go for my bike rides, I sweat, and that sweat just stays on my skin. And it might be very hot during a particular time of day that I'm riding, and so that sweat stays on my skin and my body doesn't cool off. And so I need to have more water because internally I'm heating up. In fact, a friend of mine who is another triathlete who lives in Colorado mentioned that he had recently done a 100-mile ride in Colorado over all of the hills. And it's like, wow, here in Florida, I have to try really hard to get some hill training in. It's tough. There's only a couple places around me and I got to drive out there to get to them. But in Colorado, he was basically biking up mountains, 100 miles, and he did it. He aced it, no problem. A few months later, he went to go visit South Carolina, and while he was there, he's like, I'm just going to do a 100-mile race here. It's no big deal. It's all flat. It's no problem. And he was talking to a couple of the participants in the race before he signed up, and they were signing up. These were some elite athletes that were signing up for like a metric century, which is about 60 miles. And when he told them that he was signing up for the full century, they were like, oh God, you're insane. And he was like, why do you say that? And they said, it's going to be so hot. This race doesn't start until like 8 o'clock in the morning. And by the time that full heat hits, like it's just going to be staggering. There's no way. And he was like, well, it can't be that bad. I just did 100 miles in the mountains, so 100 miles at sea level should be cake, no problem. Yeah, he crapped out, and it wasn't a mental attitude. It's not potty language. It's like what happens with the body. His body just started shutting down. It wasn't mental. It was physiological. His legs had cramped up so tightly that he couldn't physically move the pedals anymore. And I believe he had to stop at mile 88, was as far as he could get. And it had been horrible, horrible, horrible for many miles before that. So it's very different at sea level than it is at altitude. It's different in the humid climate than it is in the arid climate. And here in Florida, because it's hot and humid and we have this like greenhouse effect, our bodies heat up from the inside out. And that inside out means that like what's happening is like there's not as much fluid in our intestines, and so we don't poop. There's nothing to float the boat. So two things have to happen in order to have a good bowel movement. One of them is to float the boat, and the other is to move the boat. And so if we don't have enough liquid, we can't float the boat. And if we don't have enough peristalsis, then we can't move the boat. But for many, many, many people, they don't realize that they simply need more water in order to have a good bowel movement, and in order, in my world, the most important thing to me is how well my brain works. I put all my favorite things in there. I want them back. And so the water is number one on the cognition of your brain. It's number one on making sure that you have a nice, healthy memory, and especially long term. And it's also tied to, in addition to mental clarity, it's even tied to levelness of mood, and has been tied to a prevention for cancer. So your cells have to have water in order to move those toxins through, flush them out. If they're not getting the opportunity to take the trash out, you can imagine if this was your house and you just like kept piling trash up into a particular room, it would get stinky, it would get icky. Over time, it would get worse and worse. You wouldn't want to be in that house anymore. It would just be horrible. It would be toxic. So that's kind of what cancer is like in the body. It's just these toxic, and you would like try to put something up to keep that horrible smell away from you, and that's exactly what the body does, is it encapsulates those cells. So it's important to have that appropriate amount of water in the body in order to flush all that through. Now, the other thing that the body needs is minerals. Some part of that is salt. So where salt goes in the body, water will follow. And that means that we need to have some salt. So sometimes a really healthy alternative to electrolyte drinks like Gatorade that have a lot of refined sugar and a lot of artificial dyes and a lot of chemicals you really don't want to be putting in your body. So alternatives to Gatorade, which I have not touched for decades, there's no way I'm touching that stuff, are things like coconut water. So there's one called Harmless Harvest that I'm particularly fond of because half my family is Jamaican and they take their coconut water seriously, and it's got to be good. So Harmless Harvest is a very, very delicious one, and delicious means that it's got all the nutrients that your body needs. So that coconut water has a healthy balance of electrolytes in it. So where salt goes, water will follow. Drinking that coconut water is kind of like drinking super water. It can super hydrate you, and it can get into those cells so that everything's working the way that it's supposed to. Sometimes people will have this experience of, man, I drink water, but it just goes right through me. Now that can happen at the very beginning when you start rehydrating and you haven't been hydrating for a while. Then it takes a little while. It can take a little while to train those cells to get that water into the cells. But if you've been drinking water regularly and you still have a sense that it just feels like it goes right through you and it doesn't go into you, then try some coconut water. By the way, I have no affiliation with Harmless Harvest, and I do not get any kickback from them. I just really like their coconut water. Try that coconut water and see if that doesn't help to hydrate you. A side note about this is one of the effects of dehydration, it can affect the body in many different ways. The constipation is one of them, but one of the other ways that it affects the body is through dizziness. So the reason for this is because there's these little crystals in the ear, and those crystals can get dislodged. The way that they get dislodged is because usually they sit in this nice, juicy jelly membrane, gelatinous membrane, and that holds the crystals in place. But when the body gets dehydrated, eventually that jelly starts to dry up. And when the jelly dries up, those crystals start to move around. And when the crystals move around, that's when we experience like the seasickness, the dizziness, vertigo, things like that. What we want to do during that time is we want to make sure that we're fully hydrated. If you are fully hydrated and you're still having problems with this, the next step is coconut water. If you are doing coconut water and you're still having problems with this, the next step is, and you've already reseeded the crystals, so there are some great YouTube videos online about how to reseed the crystals, and you've already done that, then you need to go to the next level with Chinese herbs. Chinese herbs are very, very, very powerful for helping to balance the body, especially in this state that we call yin deficiency. So when the fluids of your body are drying up, burning up, that's what we call yin deficiency. And that yin deficiency leads to a lot of problems, especially ladies. It leads to a lot of problems with menopause. So menopause is most commonly affected by problems of yin deficiency, especially in the liver and in the kidneys. And that is best treated with Chinese herbal formulas. It's very, very, very powerful, very, very, very effective. So those problems of like hot sweats, night sweats, and hot flashes, what happens is there's no substance, there's not enough substance for the energy to root to. So we can talk about it like this. So energy in the body, it can be separated into yang and yin. And yang energy is like the sunshine, it's bright, it's moving. Like picture a little 4-year-old boy running into a room full of kids and going, everybody run around, right? That's that lovely yang energy, that boy energy. And then the yin energy, the feminine, is the passive, the reflective. So this is the moon, this is the ocean. Medically in the body, that is the substance. So this is fluids, this is blood. Medically in the body, yang energy is cellular metabolism. It's repair and rebuild. So with women in menopause, part of the reason that they are experiencing those hot flashes is because the yin substance is diminishing as we age. And so using the Chinese herbs helps to replenish that yin substance. And then when we have that nice strong yin foundation again and we feel juicy and lovely and fabulous, yes, this is also tied to things like moistness and other places of the body. When we have that yin back, then the yang energy has something to root to tie to, and it doesn't float up and out and cause those hot flashes or night sweats. So good. That's another reason that it's very, very important to stay hydrated, and that's another note to know when to talk to a Chinese herbalist, because it's very, very different. Okay, so we've talked about water. You'll be getting some other educational videos from me on things that are important to know as we get started. These are the basics, the fundamentals, and I'm making this video for you as my gift so that you know the great ways to get started and you know the best ways to invest your time, energy, and money for your health. Longevity wellness, that's good medicine.